All right, everyone, we'll get started here in just a minute. Just want to let you know if you'd like to provide public comment today, please take time, fill out a card, and we'll make sure that you're heard. It is a workshop, so we'll have other opportunities to speak as well, but we'll get started here shortly. Thank you. Y'all ready? You ready to go?
Okay, I don't want to chew that.
Todd, are you ready? You ready to go? Ready? You ready? Okay.
Did you check with Ricky?
Yeah, I think they got her set up. Nikki? Okay.
Yes, Mayor, I'm here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is October 24th, 2023. It is 1 o'clock p.m. We're at the City of Cape Canaveral City Council Workshop at City Hall Council Chambers, 100 Polk Avenue, Cape Canaveral, Florida. Call this meeting to order and would like to ask Mayor Pro Tem, lead us in the pledge, please. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Davis?
Here.
Councilmember Kellum?
Here.
Mayor Morrison?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Raymond?
Here.
Councilmember Willis?
Here. Great. Thank you all for being here, and Councilmember Kellum, thank you. We hear you loud and clear. Who will be joining us today virtually, the whole council here. This is a workshop, and we are at the public participation portion of the meeting. Any member of the public may address any items that do not appear on this workshop agenda or any items that obviously do. So at this time, I don't have any cards. We do not have the virtual two-way participation today. So if anyone did submit a card or would like to speak, now is the time. Please raise your hand if you did submit one and I missed it. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the council. This is a presentation and discussion to receive the updated Civic Hub project information, receive public comment, provide feedback of Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc. We refer to them as KHA at times, and direction to the city manager on moving forward with the planning and construction of the Civic Hub project. With that, I'd like to ask our city manager, if you'd like to kick us off, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And
thank you.
I do see Scott and his team here from Kimley Horn. Thank you all for being here. This is our third and final public workshop on the Civic Hub, and the Civic Hub is something that's got a long history, but it's only been called Civic Hub for the last couple of years in the strategic planning retreats. It started off as the Promenade, which was the purchase of that building and property next door, which was a strategic purchase for the city because now all of this connected city campus is all part of city, under all city ownership. So the concept very quickly evolved into, well, do we do this Civic Hub now? We didn't know what we were going to call it, but we talked about it at City Council strategic planning retreats, and we said, yeah, let's get an idea of what a Civic Hub would look like. And we started down the path with funding for this conceptual design, and Kimley Horn is doing that, and they're one step away from being done with that. And the council's already taken a look at this, and we really like what public engagement has been and how that has informed this design currently, with a focus on Friday Fest amenities and pickleball and a lot of other things that we've learned just from hosting events on Taylor Avenue over the years, food truck events, food court, et cetera, farmers markets. All those things are encapsulated in this design. As we were talking about this over the last year or two, it quickly also morphed into a stormwater project. Stormwater became the first critical initial focus of the Civic Hub. We wanted to have a stormwater solution for the Center Street Basin We do have a pump going in that was approved by City Council to purchase last week. The bids will come in later this month for the work to be done, and that whole pump system will be put in place next year, next calendar year, this current fiscal year. And that's largely grant funded by DEP. So that's going to take care of the emergency, real high-level needs of this flooding of the Center Street Basin. But the Civic Hub was also intended and will be, and Scott will talk about this, how the Civic Hub can take a lot of the attributable area of the stormwater load from the Center Street Basin and filter it to or through this Civic Hub area, so that we're taking, not only the pump is taking it out, but we're also taking a lot of that load and putting it underground in the Civic Hub, much like we did at the ball fields at Canaveral City Park. The area of the Civic Hub will handle its own stormwater infiltration, but it will also take areas from a couple blocks to the east. It'll take areas from a couple blocks to the north and take all of that into the Civic Hub, so that's not going into the Center Street Basin. That's the thinking behind all of this. So between the pump and the Civic Hub, we're going to address so much of our stormwater problems in the Center Street Basin. That became the first central focus of the Civic Hub. Let's fix some stormwater first. So we started thinking about this in two phases. Well, there's an underground stormwater part, but then there's an above ground improvement. What do we want the above ground to look like? Well, we really need to know what the above ground is going to look like before we can do the underground, because you can't put buildings and structures on top of all these storm vaults. That's not the way we want to plan to do that. So we said, we need to master plan this. So here we are now, starting with the high level view of what does it look like on top of the ground. And I think we're going to get there today. I think we're going to get there where we're going to land that plane. We know what we want the top to look like. We agree on that. Then we start focusing in earnest on the underground part. Now we know with some intelligence where to put all the stormwater improvements. And then we can talk about funding it. And when we get there, Scott, I don't want to go too far ahead of time, but I know that there's always sticker shock when we look at big picture items. We did ask Scott and his team to give us the big picture dollar, what we're looking at in 2023 dollars. But we have to also know that we're breaking that into two phases. There's going to be this first phase underground, which I do hope that council does move forward with in the next fiscal year or two. And then we can look at the second phase, the above ground, in the next 3 or 4 fiscal years down the road to get there, because that's all of it's going to take money, and we got to plan it. Having said all that, the largest lion's share of the funding is the CRA. This is fully CRA. It's been CRA. It's going to continue to be CRA. We also do have some ARPA money still left over. But we're not talking at this point about any kind of loans. We're just talking about using current existing revenue streams. We've got some enterprise funds that can be applied to this for stormwater, enterprise funds for sanitary sewer. So we do need to work our way through the funding pieces as well. Not tonight, but we will in the very near future. Today is about looking at this plan and these two phases and getting a general idea of the costs of the whole thing. So with that, Scott, I'll turn it over to your team to walk us through your presentation and hopefully get over the sticker shock at the end.
South Orange, Orlando. And thank you. We've enjoyed the journey as a part of this process as well. It started with public engagement meetings and then through a couple of conversations here. So we're going to flip through some of the big picture items, but we're going to get mainly to the finalized concept master plan. And before I go further too, it's always me sitting here, but there's a lot of people on our team. So let me just recognize those guys here too. And some of them, they're coming here actually just as their extra effort. We like to engage, to hear the process from this big picture conversation to the public, to Friday Fest and whatever. So we like to engage as a part of the community because it helps us be able to listen to your story and then put that back into working knowledge as well. So you got Nora Abbott has been doing a lot of the day-to-day project management alongside with me. Zach Hall, you've met before, but he's not here. Jake Maple did all these beautiful renderings, so Jake gets the credit for a lot of that, even though I'll take most of the credit, if you like them. If not, then Jake did them. And then Randy Gonzalez is our engineer. He's going to help us walk through some of the stormwater improvements as well. So thank you. I always forget to mention those guys that are sitting out here. Just wanted to take that for a minute this afternoon. So again, wanted to walk through a couple of things. The agenda that you've already seen, this is fairly the same that we've going through. We'll look at the master plan, where we are in the schedule. We'll look at some site context and again, reiteration of the goals that Todd really talked about. This is a stormwater project with a great civic place where we can create a community of belonging for the community. We'll look at some comparable facilities just as a refresh to look at some costs associated with those facilities. Now, how do they translate to this facility? And where we are in the master plan and then some next steps. So again, you can see, and Councilman Kellum, are you able to see, or did need to give you more direction when I flip through this?
I'm trying, I got sent an email, but if you could give me a little more direction as well, I'd
Maybe just tell her
appreciate
what page you're on.
Got it.
it. Thank you.
Yes. So 4, I'm on slide 4, just looking at what has been completed to date, so I'm on page 4, or slide 4, should be page 4 in yours. So we've gone through a series of public stakeholder engagement. We've done a presentation for the draft master plan, and then here we are today. It's kind of highlighted there for the presentation of the master plan, and we still are refining. We'll talk about the funnel of information today. We're way here at the mouth, the broadest base, 30,000 level feet, and we'll dip down into some smaller components, especially when we get into the engineering, because we want to always make sure that when we're putting together a plan, moving it forward, that it's going to be implementable. And then we also need to make sure that what are those costs that we are going to be implementing, and so we make sure we're back checked. So that's at the end of this process, and then at the very last part of this, we'll submit the final based on your feedback and input today. And it will include some costs, some phasing, and some other things. You've seen this before, site context and goals, and I just wanted to highlight that last component. And manager did a great job of kind of highlighting that, so I'll just read that. We were really trying to make sure that this redevelopment area is not just a place of belonging for the community, but it's going to address stormwater needs for the entire Center Street Basin area in that stormwater management strategy. And it looks like there's a missing graphic. But just envision that that highlighted area there in the orange. I don't think it's showing up on your screen either. Yes, that's just an enlargement of the entire Center Street area to give you an idea of what we've been continually evaluating in the Center Street Basin area, the stormwater area, and those improvements within it. There it is. See, that was easy as just the next slide. Just to highlight where our site is and where that falls within the entire Center Street area within your overall stormwater master plan. So again, just moving on to the comparable facilities. Councilman, I'm on page 8, slide 8. Moving to 9, the Rockledge, the Civic Hub there in Rockledge. If you look at that project, that generally was about $2.5 million of improvements. The bathroom was a prefab bathroom that came a little bit later, so it wasn't really a part of that. And they didn't do any heavy infrastructure. So there's no major stormwater improvements. This is all infiltration. To give you an idea, that's the performance stage, that's an elevated synthetic turf area, some low walls, it's places for market tents and some other things. To give you an idea of how much, lighting, some decorative furnishings and fixtures, some signage. The Reeder Park, if you look on page 10 here, in the upper left-hand corner is kind of the major portion, and this is, just think of the area that we are designing. If you think about the concept plan of just the main event lawn, which is generally that phased area of Reeder Park in Longwood, is about $4.5 million in comparable facilities. And again, they don't have any infrastructure, no street redevelopment, no street infrastructure, no stormwater improvements. And they have some similar buildings or structures or amphitheaters that would be similar to what we're projecting here. And that does not include some of the major facilities that they also had on the surrounding areas, because if you look at that, you're getting closewards of $8.5 million, inclusive of everything that they've done over multiple phases in the project. So let's look and just dive into what the final master plan is. Based on council, last time we had a number of improvements, and we landed on option A, if you recall, where we had the basically the redevelopment of the tennis and pickleball courts in that lower left-hand corner of the picture, which is in the kind of the western, southeastern corner there at Poinsettia and Fillmore. And we had a centralized community event lawn at the main hub of the center, and then working on either side of Taylor with the saving of the mural wall, and then the food truck court area there at 12 and 16. You'll see those bullet line items with the consistent promenade that the city manager really talked about, where we connect the City Hall campus through that promenade that you see there, bullet number 9B in that red bullet area, kind of working its way around, and then it connects over Taylor Avenue, which would be totally pedestrian, except for a piece of it we're going to have to connect to Poinsettia for food trucks and maybe while we don't have events going on. But it would not connect to Atlantic or A1A, just as Polk does not connect. And as a total sidebar, we'll coordinate and are coordinating with the Presidential Streets ongoing master plan and concept study that you have that's being done by another partner of ours, Adam Kerr and Kelly Klepper, presenting, and I believe you're pretty close to the finalization of that document too. So we'll coordinate through some of those efforts on the one-waiting or the strategy of the Presidential Streets. So that master plan, I went through it really quickly because I'm going to highlight some other components that we've now taken this master plan and we've done some 3D renderings that you see already over here to give you more of a character and a feel. This is concept still, right? So we don't know exactly where every light pole and what every low wall and every amphitheater materials and that finishes. But the renderings are starting to give you some idea of the character, the shape, the space as you start to walk through it. I sent over the renderings to staff, and I believe Tim said he could already hear Todd's band playing Led Zeppelin in the background. Now, I'm not sure he said Led Zeppelin, but I forget now who Pink Floyd. So he said he could hear Todd's band playing Pink Floyd with the food trucks, piping out the freshly cooked arepas or something of that effect. But now I forget, Tim. But anyway, so we'll give you those images just so you can kind of walk through in greater detail. And then we'll come back and hit on any of the master plan from a plan view if there's things that we've gone through too quickly. And then we'll also take a moment. This is a graphic that we showed you last time to talk about the potential underground stormwater areas. And so again, we've taken it at the 30,000, the mouth of the funnel. We've zeroed in, and Randy's going to give us some more detail in just a minute on what we've identified, how those are, and we've even brought some other smaller samples of the technology that would be used as a part of that underground storm chambers or storm catchment areas. So let me just walk you through a couple of the big ideas and the big picture renderings. We've got one of those here as a printout, and then we'll leave the rest of them here as well for staff, or to be here if in case somebody isn't able to see online, they can come by and take a quick peek at it. So this is kind of looking to the south toward the park as if you're above A1A looking back towards the park. And so you've really got that Civic Hub marketplace where you've got the food trucks and vendors directly off of Taylor Avenue and A1A, and we would still have that consistent promenade that links you to City Hall. And this is the place where the old retail building was torn down. So that's generally where that area. The dog park is existing and will be maintained immediately behind it. And then you've got that wonderful, massive canopy, what we're calling and labeled there the Xeriscape Park. And that's kind of the way it is. It's some small little stormwater. And all of that would basically be the same as it is today with some enhancements, and I'll get to that at the very end. And then you can see off to the distance the parking lot to your left, which is the sheriff's parking lot area. So if we come back to the promenade along A1A, you can see we've maintained the mural wall there. We're going to demo the back side of that mural wall, and I'll show you a picture from the other side looking back towards that, where we would have restrooms and concessions. That A1A promenade would continue forward and then tie you right into that flex lawn where the performance stage is, and that's really the heart of the Civic Hub from an amenity space, from a civic lawn, from a amenity area. Half of that would be synthetic turf, and we're going to evaluate underground stormwater treatment within that area as well. And so anchoring that space would be that performance stage. And again, I think council was all in agreement for this option so that it could nuzzle itself in some of that existing vegetation. We could buffer it from A1A, and then that performance stage would kind of angle more towards the sheriff as opposed to angling toward residential areas. And then we could still create a nice buffer. And then kind of working around that oval along that performance area, that amenity lawn, we have some swings and just playful play mounds so that as parents may have small kids, some people can be on the outside of that performance area, but still watching small kids and keeping those little, happy feet and anxious feet engaged while they're still being able to listen to a performance. You've got in the center there the Nancy Hansen Center, and we have allocated some improvements in the overall opinion or probable construction cost for that. Just do some painting, some light upgrades, some ADA, and potential some universal upgrades if the budget allows. And then again, in the background, you see the 6 new pickleball courts, the 2 new tennis courts, some added parking along Fillmore, and then access to the backside of that flex lawn, amenity lawn. And then gateways at either end. Right now, the rendering is only showing one gateway at Poinsettia and Taylor, and then we'll have a highlight of that, but possibly, if the budget allows, even one at Taylor where it used to intersect with A1A. And that's the same thing without the labels, just a little bit larger and a little cleaner if you want to see a little bit of the detail. And we'll just flip through to give you some perspective. Now, there are some refinements in this exhibit. Again, we haven't detailed out the type of wall, but it would most likely be consistent with your wall and your materials that you have for City Hall, kind of working it and tying everything together. Just a cool effect, just kind of looking at the opportunities for the facility to create not only a civic hub, but a gateway along A1A. And at night, lighting is wonderful, especially from your tennis and pickleball. Obviously, you need it. But mainly, we're thinking about safety, security, and thinking about ways to allocate lighting in a way that can maybe be on different systems. Maybe there's overhead or pedestrian lighting at the scale of 12 to 15 feet, but if you have a performance or an event, can we also have some additional lighting that's down at your footpath or your travel area, so you can have some light bollard lighting along the perimeter of the sidewalk, so that if a performance is going on, you can have the overhead kind of turned down, the lighting at your foot level for just pathway lighting and making sure you can see your way around the park, and then obviously security. And then there's a whole level of enhanced lighting, whether it's in the landscape. There's wonderful techniques that we've been exploring in and up in the canopy of the big oaks to really highlight those, give them a 24/7 appearance. And then festoon lighting, because it's just fun, right? It just creates an atmosphere of fun and activity and an overhead ceiling for folks to really enjoy those spaces. And that's just kind of a look. We're sitting on this picture. We're looking at Poinsettia down Taylor, and that would be for a festival or a closed-off street or an opportunity, a curbless street, so that if we need to have, when it is closed, we have that real fluid walking without a tripping hazard of curbs in those areas. So that just gives you a character and a feel of what that space may look like. Here we've backed out again. Here we're sitting at A1A looking at the existing mural wall and that environment that can be created with the food trucks and the activity. And I have to give Jake a hard time. You'll always spot in all of Jake's renderings, there's balloons. He is a balloon guy. So if you like balloons, it kind of creates a festive atmosphere. Now this is the back side of the existing mural wall. The colors you see there is just purely paint. And we've just shown something to kind of set the tone, to kind of set that off. And we've got a structure in between. This is where the old racquetball courts would be. So you're going to be in the main event lawn looking back towards this. On the one side, closest to the Nancy Hansen, with that one structure there, we have storage in the back side, and then we have a concession building on the front side that can be activated. Now, this isn't going to have any kind of grease trap for major food prep, but you can have a hot plate, you can serve concessions, you can certainly have drinks and some other things so that can partner with any activities that you have on the event lawn. And then the backspace, what we're saying is there could be cubbies, there could be a chalk wall, there could be some other art or activities that are partnered with Parks and Rec to say, okay, this could be some other after school or some other programs that could be exterior. And then on the left side of that building, that door you see there would be restrooms, and then behind that would be some additional storage. So you kind of have two structures, kind of a fun structure in the middle, a shade structure, and all of this is where the old racquetball courts were. And then this space kind of looks out onto the major event lawn. The performance stage is about a 27 by 20 with about a 12 to 15 foot overall height. We want to make sure we have enough volume for lighting and appropriate speakers, acoustic elements, and then it would be slightly elevated. Right now we're showing 4 or 5 steps, but based on cost, based on some other things, we certainly want to elevate it to a certain degree so that it gets those musicians, that performers are above the rest of the crowd. And then that foreground, the light green, would all be synthetic turf, and then the other areas that you see, the darker green underneath the trees, would be planting or grass just for people to be able to wander, maybe some movable seating, and that's why we have additional storage so that you can pull that in and out of those areas. And the cars you see in the back would be A1A, but maintaining a lot of the existing buffer, a lot of the existing plant material, and certainly in all these areas, all the existing big tree, oak tree canopies. Now here's a little bit of an aerial area. This is kind of in between that area along the perimeter of the sidewalk, that big oval. And this is that space just on the outside. So it can kind of be fun for someone, maybe the band's just a little too loud and so they want to get off to the side, but they have some small kids so they can have a little bit of a mound area that would be a rubberized surface. They can still listen to the band, the performance, or whatever is going on in the space, but they can still watch their kids. They can have a little fun and active zone in and around those areas that's in between that areas. And that would be just south of where the Nancy Hansen building is today. And then you can see the 6 pickleball courts. Because we've redone the pickleball courts, this is not just 2 tennis courts area. So this is basically 6 new courts with 2 new courts over time. If we need to, in a phasing program, leave the 2 tennis courts in that north section because they have still playability in them, then maybe that's a later phase. But we'll talk more about that when we talk about the underground stormwater. There's an up-close shot of just some fun swings that create movement, that create some livelihood, that create a little separate space along that perimeter walk as an anchor between those 2 spaces. And this is the area that we were talking about. It's existing. It's right to the south of the sheriff's building, just to the west of that parking area where you have some big canopies. And what we've shown here is just to get your feet up out of that kind of little low-lying area with some decking, some enhanced lighting up as moonscaping up in the tops of those trees to create a fun environment where if you're having just a food truck event, people can get off outside of the tent zone, eat their meals, have a little bit of rest, relaxation, get out of the sun a little bit in the shade, and then get back over to the event lawn or some other spaces. This is the more quiet preserve area. So I'm going to quickly just talk about the master plan, and then Randy will go into the details. We've evaluated right now 3 main systems. What I'm showing you here is one of the systems that we'll show you in greater detail. This is called Storm Trap. This is, it does a number of different things for the stormwater. It certainly can do detention, but that's not our main objective for this project. We want to do some treatment, allow for infiltration as at number 2, and I'm on slide number 25. Councilman, I'm sorry, I didn't give you the updates there as we went along. So mainly we want to do 2 and 4. We want to allow for infiltration into the subground, so we don't have to go all the way and out through the Center Street Basin to remove pressure already on that stormwater. And it certainly is a stormwater LID per that kind of graphic shown in number 3. But the biggest thing is we want some treatment out of this. And so Randy, give us an idea. Here's the potential stormwater areas that we highlighted, and then here's the kind of a more detailed evaluation. This is a secondary overlay on top of that same graphic. You can kind of see the trees, the existing trees. Here, the existing trees are in green. The blue outline and the white shading is the potential underground areas. So you can see we're trying to maintain and keep all those amazing big oak trees. And now here's the secondary, furthermore, kind of putting some analytic rigor onto the stormwater analysis.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Randy Gonzalez. I'm with Kimley Horn, 189 South Orange Ave, Suite 1000, Orlando, Florida. So I'm here to talk to you guys about underground exfiltration systems. By show of hands, has anybody heard of these? Okay, cool. All right, not everyone, but that's what I'm here for, right, is to teach you a little bit about underground exfiltration systems. So over here, how we're looking at the stormwater management design is we're kind of looking at splitting the site into 2 basins, the internal to the site, right? So we're looking at the west basin, which is the red areas, and then we're looking at the east basin, which is the purple areas. The west basin is going to discharge. Right now, preliminarily, we're looking at discharging to the existing catch basin on the top left of the drawing, but that's the most southwest point. And then the purple basin, the east basin, will ultimately tie in and discharge to the existing curb inlet on the bottom left of the drawing. So that'll be the southeast point. We were looking preliminarily at the exfiltration systems. We looked at a couple different systems. We looked at 3 of them. There's a couple concrete options and a couple plastic options that we can explore. But ultimately, when we did the preliminary stormwater calculations, we were looking at internal to the site, probably around half an acre foot or 22,000 cubic feet of storage would be required just for the Civic Hub portion. And then anything additional to the 22,000 cubic feet of storage would be volume that we could take in off of the adjacent streets. So when we were looking at high-level, very conservative numbers, we had to make some assumptions, and some of those assumptions were what the seasonal high water table is and the percent void ratio within these structures. But when we were looking at the high-level numbers, we were seeing that if we maximize the Civic Hub site and place as many exfiltration systems in as we can possibly fit in so that the Center Street Basin can benefit as much as possible, we're looking at approximately a volume of 80,000 to 120,000 cubic feet total in between the 2 systems. So again, in the beginning I said that the Civic Hub portion would only require about 22,000 cubic feet of storage, and we're getting somewhere, depending on the system that the city ends up choosing, we could get approximately between 80,000 to 120,000 cubic feet. So that's in excess of about 100,000 cubic feet of storage that we can take in from offsite and that we can use for treatment, which is ultimately the goal here.
Can I interrupt for a question?
Sure, please.
So the 22,000 cubic feet of the Civic Hub area, that's the area shaded in white we're looking at, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
And that, I'm going to call that 2 blocks. So you got the block from Fillmore to Taylor and the block from Taylor to Polk.
Yes.
2 blocks, 22,000. And then we could store 80 to 100,000 in addition to that.
Yes.
So that could be 4 to 5 times this.
That is
so
correct.
10 more blocks potentially.
Potentially, yes. But we would have to find a way to interconnect the runoff from those other blocks to tie it into this system so that we can, ultimately discharge here, treat the water, and then everything else that doesn't get treated when it stages up too high, it gets discharged downstream.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So again, some of the, this is very high level design. Some of these numbers may change depending, once we get, geotechnical information based off of the soils. We'll need to determine where the seasonal high water elevation is. Right now we're estimating it's about 4 feet below existing elevation. And that assumption is because we're also working on the Veterans Memorial Park project to the northeast of the site. And it's about a block and a half away to the northeast, and that site has a seasonal high water elevation of 4 feet. The lowest elevation on our site is at about 7 feet to the south, and generally it's about 8.5 to 9 feet. So I'm looking at what the storage would be with the existing grade. Now, if we want to bring in some fill, 6 inches or a foot of fill, we can also explore that option, but that wasn't part of this analysis. But of course, that would get us more volume and more storage if we bring in some fill to this site. The primary areas where we're going to get the most storage is going to be underneath the racquetball and the tennis courts. It's just a big footprint. Pickleball. Thank you. It's a big footprint, and it's at a high enough elevation where we can get a foot or two of storage underneath there. In some of these areas, we're only able to fit 1 foot systems. I'd like to show you guys some examples of what we have, what we've explored.
That's you've seen, that's City.
Yes, so this one,
City Park.
This one's at City Park, and this one is by a manufacturer called ADS Solutions. This is a plastic pipe, and it's in, this half oval shape. So this one here is, if you could picture it, it'll sit on top of some rocks, and then on the sides of it, it'll be filled with rocks, and water will infiltrate, will come down from the ground, and there's these holes here on the side, these perforations where water will seep in and stage up. So this system here, most of these systems here have a lifespan of 75 years to 100 years. They're very resistant to load. These can be H20 to H25 loaded. Heavy vehicle traffic can be, is what can be sustained by these. And another one that we have here, so again, that one is a plastic pipe, a very strong plastic pipe. What we have here is Storm Trap. This is a different system. And what this is it's, from this one you get more treatment because there's a lot more void space inside of the system. It's basically, if I can pass this around, but basically what it is, it's these concrete boxes with arches on the inside of it and allows more water to stage up. The reason that this is more efficient than that system is because you get most of your storage from the oval, but everything outside of the oval, if you're to draw a square around the half oval, all of the empty spaces are lost volume. So you would lose a lot of volume. Legos.
All right, we won't pass them around, we'll just throw them around.
So again, this is a good picture of what it is, right? So it's these concave shapes like this. So if you were to draw a square around this, right, you would lose out on anything that's outside of that in volume. So
The biggest thing is that we're still exploring these.
Yeah.
And what we've done is we've talked to 3 major vendors, have some information to 2 others, just to help us, 1, let's ballpark the right cost, and then 2, as we're gonna evaluate, you quickly honed in on we have more volume than we actually have area. Now we need to see if the elevations, the groundwater, the real engineering rigor will come into the next couple of design phases to say, can we pull stuff from poinsettia? Can we get all the way over to orange? Elevations, maybe not. But on Fillmore for sure, Taylor for sure, park down Poinsett into this system and all of those neighboring areas, at least within a block of each of some of those streets.
A couple follow-up questions. You talked about the loading on the plastic system. You said the vehicular trucks, and you also talked about the lifespan of the plastic. Can you talk about the loading and the lifespan of the concrete?
It's about the same. So these are also approximately 100 years is what they're tested and advertised is, and the loading is just as much. So
It's just a greater capacity.
Excuse me?
The big difference is greater capacity.
It is bigger capacity. That's the biggest difference. And with this one, since we may have shallow seasonal or shallow groundwater table, we require more cover for this one. So the more cover we require, the smaller the system has to get. For something like this, we require a lot less cover because it's so structurally sound that you only have to provide about a foot, about 8 inches of rock on top of it, and then your pavement section or your grass section on top of it. Or pavers if you want to do pavers as well. So for this one, you require less height on top of the system for it to be structurally sound. And that allows you to go a little bit deeper and you get more volume out of a system like this.
And on the, I'm sorry.
And they're also very modular.
Yes.
I talked about it last time in terms of Legos, but really it's just the modularity. So you can take it in and around major areas of routes. Maybe it's even light poles, right? Light poles have decks and penetrations that come through, so you basically leave out components and you work it into, and that's the graphic that you can see. You can see the modularity of it being working around some of those areas. Yes, Kim.
I was just wondering, are there other alternatives?
Besides going underground?
No, those two.
Oh, yes. There's probably 10 different manufacturers. We've explored 3 options. And those are the 3 that we work with the most, but we're more than welcome to...
Which one is more cost effective?
The most cost effective is a system called Contec. I don't have an example of it on me. I have literature that I can pass around for the Contec system. And what that one is, that one's a corrugated metal pipe. It's a ribbed metal pipe. It's aluminum. I spoke to the representatives, and they said that the aluminum will withstand the salt water. And that one has a lifespan of 50 years to 100 years, depending on the resistance to, it's called the ohm resistance, OHM resistance. So I guess some testing would have to be done for that.
Yeah. But there's multiple different varieties, and some create better benefits. Some are better modularity. The Contec system is a circular pipe. Again, so it basically 2 of these put together. So there's options. We're going to look at a lot of the volume. One, we don't want to create too much volume, put extra infrastructure that you can't get storage to it, right? So that's the first thing that we'll look at when we get into the first phase of design, is to make sure that we have enough. We could explore, I don't know if staff wants to look at this, but we could explore increasing or tying into the A1A, but that means FDOT, that means more regulatory. I see faces all around whenever I mention the word DOT. But again, so there's other areas. And again, we don't want to create more storage than you need. We are already projecting 4 to maybe 5 times than just treating the site we have. It's a matter of getting it all there. And then we'll just right size it per that. And there's many other systems. And at this level of our analysis at concept, we felt really comfortable just kind of evaluating 3 to help us with the cost to right size the order of magnitude where we are.
And Mayor, I was just going to kind of hone in a little bit more on the cost differences that a council member or Mayor Pro Tem brought up. I understand that there's pros and cons of each system. Some of it's additional storage, some of it's the modularity and so on. Lifespan is of critical importance to us. We want to invest money in something that's going to last for the long haul, for sure. But when you look at the 3 systems that you evaluated, are they close in prices. When you consider one has very little need for additional fill on top of it, for example, or very little underwork. When you look at the whole wash of prices, are they all pretty much the same, or is there an outlier that's really a lot less expensive that we should be looking at?
Yeah, there's two systems that are the most cost effective. That one is the contact system, the corrugated metal pipe. That one's at about, I'll speak in terms of cost per cubic foot of storage. So for the contact system and this ADS system, those two provide the least amount of storage. There's a lot less void space, and those are at about $10 to $14 a cubic foot, depending on the amount of pipe that contact provides and the size of the pipes. The smaller the pipe, the more expensive it is. The other system is this one right here, the storm trap system. This one is on the pricier side. This one is nearly double at $24 per cubic foot. $20 to $24 a cubic foot. I think it's closer to 22 is what it averages out to. And you do get a lot more volume out of it. So I think when I looked at it for the contact corrugated metal pipes system, since that one's just a circular section and you lose everything outside of the box, right? For that one, we were looking at probably like 85,000 cubic feet of storage in total. And this system is the one that provided the most. The storm trap system, the concrete vaults, this one provided the most storage, and this one was right around 120,000 cubic feet of storage.
We talked to another vendor very similar to this in a concrete system. It's the Old Castle system by Bellegarde, which is another concrete system, and that's about the same.
Yes.
A little bit different, a little bit maybe more costs. So, you know, you're really looking at it from how much volume you get in combination with that cost per cubic yard of volume.
Right, so we can analyze it. Let's say we get into design, right, and we start analyzing it, and we determine we can only get 80,000 cubic feet. And there's nothing else that we can do to get more stormwater runoff from other blocks to this basin, to this detention system. Then, of course, it would be feasible to only get...
That will drive that decision.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
We're not going to go the extra, 20%.
If we're not going to use it.
System that's if we can't get the water there.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So there's an unknown factor at this point.
There is, yes.
Thank you.
And that's going to be exactly into the budgets that we've set. We've set budgets based on not the high end, not the lowest end, a little bit of the middle of the road with some unknown factor. And because we think that that's where you'll be able to serve whatever you need to be able to do that.
Thank you.
We could bore you with the details, or we could throw storm trap cubes at you. But
I've also got some literature that I printed out that I can pass around if that interests you guys, or I can hand it to you guys at the end of the meeting, whatever you guys would like.
Well, thank you very much. Very informative, very helpful. And I think at this time we can continue to ask questions if there's not anything else from you.
I'm going to give you some broad brush.
Yes.
Just picking up the pieces here. We're kicking them around. Go back to make sure you have any questions about the master plan. This is basically option A. We did some refinements to it that are unnoticeable from this, but we've included it in the language. For example, Taylor Avenue. We've included some removable bollards in a little turnaround area right there in the middle of the drawing at number 14, so that if Taylor Avenue is open, but you only have something at the food truck or vendor, you could still have some on-street parking on Taylor. You could go down, do some removable bollards, go halfway into the block, turn around and come back out. But it would always be disconnected. It would always be shut off from A1A. So we included that based on some comments and discussions that we had, and then some minor tweaking of where the fields pushed down that were east of Nancy Hansen, and we squeezed in and refined a little bit of that swing area, that playground space, as it was a little bit larger on the last one, and we refined that a little bit just to organize it a little tighter around that major event lawn. So I wanted to throw some big picture costs at you. And what we've done is we've walked around the major components of the of the Civic Hub and have created ballpark, what we call opinion or probable construction costs. Again, we haven't done the absolute high ones in the stormwater areas, but we've done enough to think we got enough budget for whatever the engineering outcome is that we can get there. What the graphics are showing, these little lines, is what we're going to do based on our dialogue and prioritization that we get from you. We've thrown some buckets of budget at two major categories. The light blue says infrastructure and park enhancements, and then the second half of that is facilities and building structures. So we've got about $5.5 million and maybe $3 million, $2.5 million, $2.7 million in facilities and building structures. And then we've given you a subtotal of construction budget, and then we've just thrown at a very broad 10% of design and engineering and permitting and survey and geotechnical at the very bottom end of that number to give you a total number. Again, some of these are just very broad. For example, I'll walk you through a couple of high level. General conditions, mobilization, demolition, and clearing is fairly self-explanatory. And for a size and scale of a project, we've put some ballparks there in a $250,000 in each of those. Gateway improvements is very similar to that graphic that we showed you for maybe an arch or a gateway or the promenade that links you along A1A. And so that would be $350,000. Some signage allocation for additional maybe at the corner to the south along A1A. Concrete paving includes above whatever storm system would be the below grade. And so whatever we do above that, we've allocated enough to put improvements back on top for another about $230,000. And then enhanced concrete is what we're going to do. Maybe we don't do asphalt paving, but maybe we do concrete unit pavers. Or maybe we do something that would enhance the character, the feel, the color, and it includes a lot of different elements that are throughout the park, not just over your parking areas, but it includes things like the event lawn and synthetic turf and the raised decking in the passive areas. And so there's a significant number there as well. And you can see we continue down through some franchise utilities would be cable or electric. We don't think that we need any major electrical improvements. One, there was a retail building there before that had power. Dancing Hanson has power. There's a 3-phase coming off the back of the sheriff. So we think that we're going to be sufficient there. But we have allocated about $500,000 for lighting and electrical improvements. And that includes all of the things that we had talked about, the safety, the security, the enhanced lighting, the pedestrian at 12 to 15 feet of lighting, the festoon lighting, the fun lighting, the enhanced that maybe lights up the big oak trees. And so all of those would be about $500,000. The stormwater as a whole, you can we've got about $2.6 million of stormwater. A significant part of that could be grants, and it won't be $2.6 million if we don't need it. We talked about getting that extra 20% of additional volume. If we don't need it, we're not going to design it in the system. And I'll stop there. And what I'm illustrating as a part of this graphic is the dotted lines that lead you from stormwater up to phase 1, the dotted line that leads you to phase 2, or the dotted line that leads you to maybe a phase 2 alternative. And that's the stage at which we're out right now. We had some conversations with staff. We need to hear your priorities. We certainly, to set these budgets appropriately. We certainly don't want to do infrastructure that requires a connection to a sanitary sewer line for a new restroom building after we've done Taylor Avenue, right? That doesn't make sense. So we need to do it in a way that is thoughtful. And if you say the restrooms are an absolute priority, then we need to make sure that the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, to support those new restrooms are in place either in Taylor or we push it south to fill more, but we need to have accommodated it before we do Taylor Avenue in those improvements. And that would be the same for tennis courts. If the tennis courts have life in them, and we may push the tennis courts out instead of tearing them up to put underground stormwater underneath them, we're going to let that have some life expectancy until they need to be resurfaced or some other component. Then you do the underground storage, and then you put the tennis courts back. And we are budgeting for a concrete base on tennis and pickleball. The manager talked about having a product that is going to be here for the long term. That's what we want to be thinking about. Your infrastructure here for the rest of all of us in this room lifespan. So we think that concrete gives you that longest span, plus it gives you nice, controlled, flat surface. Asphalt tends to get some ripples in it, puddling, some other things over time, and then probably more maintenance costs associated with that. So I paused there on stormwater, and you can kind of read through some of the other buckets that we have for potable water, sanitary sewer, some furnishings, landscape, and irrigation to give you a total cost of around $5 million, $5.697 million there for infrastructure and park enhancements. And then the facilities is a next line item. You can see we've got about $2.780,000 of rough ballparks at this stage for what we think. That restroom and concession building that we showed you on the back side of the existing mural, we're allocating about $1 million. Now that would include the concession building on one side, the restroom building on the other side, and then storage behind that, all behind that existing mural wall where the existing racquetball courts are today. The performance amphitheater is about a 27 by 20, 12 to 15 foot tall, elevated stage with ADA accessibility for about $500,000 we're budgeting. Can you get one for half that? We probably could. We just need to design it in a fashion based on what you and or staff determine is the budget and or the priority, and then we'll work through some of those other areas. And then likewise, we've allocated some small pavilion shade structures, some architectural decorative swings that we highlighted, the mounds and playground structures, and we've got a couple $100,000 in each of those elements, and each of them have variables, right? Are we going to buy a Corvette or a Chevette? Each is a car, but we're going to price them, and that's where we've given you a middle of the road, but to do it right for a long-term improvement. And then we've got between pickleball and tennis courts another $300,000 each, and then $80,000 allocated to the Nancy Hansen Center upgrades for a total of about $8.5 million. And again, we put 10% in design contingencies, and it has never been that. Those are just buckets for you to incur. And then some of these costs, you might have escalation because these are multi-year prices, right? So I think the city manager told us that a local municipality is building the same facility that you have here for double the cost.
More than that, yeah. Cocoa Beach.
Yeah, in Cocoa. So we have to recognize that we don't know when all of these are coming online, and they're certainly not coming online this year or next. So we have to project some escalation in some of those numbers to give you targets to either say, yes, here's a priority, or we need to cut that back, and we think that we have, or you can give us a budget that says we have this number, what can we do for this allocation of money? And then we can try to help right-size this, understanding what has to go in from an infrastructure standpoint or a support infrastructure, and then we can target those phases to make that work. I said a lot, and there's a lot to digest, and these are big numbers, and we understand that. So we want to, you know, their allocation of probable areas, and we certainly want to hear your priorities, and then we want to make sure we can do them in the right sequence.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you all for working through some of the details all the way down to the products. And I understand these numbers are high level, and I very much appreciate it. Do we have a copy of that? It's difficult to see when you say when go down the line. When you ask about priorities, are we talking about within that budget area?
the phase.
The last slide you just had?
Phase,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, absolutely. We
Where
could,
is that?
we have not provided that yet.
Oh,
We just have a copy in this presentation, and certainly we'll have that available.
We can forward this to council
Yes.
later this afternoon.
thank you.
Thank you.
As you walk through, just as I walk through the imagery, you can kind of walk through and say, what are your priorities? If infrastructure needs to be done first, which it typically does, right? We could look at Taylor and say, all right, well, Taylor Avenue, if you look back through Randy's graphic right here, we have a section highlighted there along Taylor, and we could make sure that we could do that component of Taylor for that East Basin underground stormwater, do the necessary enhancements, but not build the concession stand or the restroom, but just make sure that the sanitary sewer that's existing in Taylor, we either move it out of the way, we rehab it, or make sure that we weave it through that storm chamber system so that it will support the restrooms when you do choose to do them. And there's other things besides that. There's electrical lines and, and some other things. So as you evaluate what you think that you want to do, or we can come back, work with staff, and give you, based on a budget, say, I want to spend X dollars. What's the best way we can spend, X dollars in next fiscal year? And certainly staff can work with us on some of those. So I'm at your pleasure on how you think you want to work through some of these.
Thank you. I'm sure we got a few questions. Just want to check in. Councilmember Kellum, are you still tracking along with us?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. If there's not any initial questions,
Go ahead.
I'd like to take, after maybe get through a brief break and have an opportunity to go look at a few of these and make sure that we just stay focused on the objectives for outreach. I think it was very helpful in the summary, the top three, and try to get through this. We're at 2 o'clock now. Councilmember Willis, did you have something?
I can wait till we come back.
Okay.
I don't think we really need a break. I mean, we have people here in our audience. I think we should try to finish this in about 1 hour
That's
today, because we've already had 2 workshops. So I think, we should move on rather than to take a break, unless that's absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Yes, I think we've been here for 1 hour, and typically at 1 hour we like to check in. I would like a 5-minute break at least. This council, if it chooses, can proceed and carry on. You have a majority. I'll be right back as soon as I can. I certainly don't want to disrespect anyone. I would actually like to see if we could get a printed copy of the numbers, only if that is essential to determining the priorities. I know we said we could email them out after, or something. It was difficult to see due to the font size. Yeah. And in the interim of 5 minutes, my hope was to be able to get one of those. But if that's not possible, totally understand, or reasonable at least, of course. So yes, if anyone would like to take a break. Okay.
I have a question. I wanted to ask you what a flex, you can go. I wanted to ask what a flex lawn. You said flex lawn?
Yeah.
What is that? What is that?
Flexible activities.
Okay.
That's all.
Just curious.
Yeah,
that was
sorry.
a question.
We throw around acronyms and lingo and whatever. Yeah. It's just the main activity lawn.
Okay. So if you were to look at the timeline on this, to get to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, say, for example, I've divided it myself. This would be about a 6 or 7 year project, would you say? How much time would you think? Would you determine?
Budget.
Exactly. Okay. But I mean, realistically, would you say?
I could be 3 years.
You could do this in 3 years.
You probably could.
Okay, thank you.
I mean,
just a curiosity.
But it all depends your budget. The reason I said that is there's certain improvements that.
Of course, I think our priority is stormwater, wastewater. That's our first priority.
Right. So there's certain improvements that need to be done collectively, right? If you think about the pickleball and tennis, those kind of go together. You could take the infrastructure of some of this main core, Taylor Avenue, because once you change up Taylor Avenue, you think about Taylor and this infrastructure. Now, does this piece go with this, or does this go with this? We could play around with some of that. The parking improvements and the stormwater underneath these is really just a convenience factor. You're going to have to take parking out of here. Where are they going to park? You're going to lose parking here for the tennis. So we got to be thinking about that. And do we do one year so that you can get some on-street parking along Taylor? You can remove the street. You can have this as more of a safer environment. So then you come in and do this, that you could then park here, and maybe we could create some on-street parking on Fillmore to replace this. So you're not taking a facility, a parking, an enhancement out of play while one is being done. So I just outlined some big picture elements, and then the bathroom needs to be done when you demo this component, but we need to have done the infrastructure in Taylor. The flex lawn and all of this needs to probably be done at one time but you could start demoing some of these unused facilities in year one, whatever that may be, fiscal year or next year.
If you're going to proceed, I just want to be clear for the audience sake. I'll be back in 5 minutes. I'd like to take if that's okay, 5-minute recess. If we need longer, happy to take 5 more. But formally, if you want to take the questions and continue, I don't think there's any issue with that. So thank you.
I have one more question. No, the AstroTurf. Why do we really have to have AstroTurf near that performance area instead of the grass that's already there? I'm just curious.
It's great for flexibility.
But what about the upkeep?
There's no upkeep. There's very limited upkeep.
Okay. All right.
So it gives you if you rain, say it rains the day right before the event, and if you get a lot of people out there and they are walking around in that area, then it really could cause muddy area. There's shade and canopy. If you get a lot of people on sod, it certainly can. It's not as nice as sitting on a synthetic turf. And we did the same thing for Rockledge Civic Hub in that main component.
Okay, I guess I hadn't noticed that, so I was curious.
It does.
But the plan's nice. A couple other little things I wanted to ask. As far as like that stage, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. The stage. I want to ask you some questions about the stage. Like, I'm going to come.
Okay.
Mickey, everybody's on a 5-minute break.
I just want to share.
Thank you.
Is there any, like some of the musicians, they like this with, to have the air
You got it. It it exposed my automation.
Yeah, me too.
Confused. That's true. That's, and she used them before. She Doug too. It's like Lamar and Mary Russell, husband and wife, served this city for a half century combined. Two P&Z and code enforcement, the two big boards. All righty, we're going to get started here in just a minute. We're
Started without me.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to call the meeting back to order. It is 2:21 p.m. We are continuing our City Council workshop here. And just want to remind everyone, this is just a workshop. We're not going to take any official action tonight as a City Council. However, if you have public comments, and certainly as the council engages with staff and Kimley Horn, we'll be able to provide direction and guidance through the design, and that's really the big goal for today. So I did get one public comment card. If there's any others that'd like to submit, please do so. And with that, I just want to make sure, I think we were going through some questions. Mayor Pro Tem Raymond was at the end, and if we're okay, I'll give you the floor back, or unless it's back to us. Okay, we'll continue to work through it. Councilmember Kellum, checking in with you.
Yes, Mayor, I'm here.
Okay, if all right, do you want to go ahead? Do you have any questions at this time you want to ask or comments?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Ideas? Yeah.
To ask right now. Looking at the plans and, we're going to have food trucks and a food truck area, hopefully a farmer's market and all that. Why do we need a concession stand? Is my one question. And then I was thinking about, how we've heard from tennis players, pickleball players. There's 3 available courts in the C5 for pickleball. And then if we add these 4 courts, that would be 7 for pickleball and 2 for tennis. If we limit ourselves to 2 tennis courts, are we limited our ability to host tournaments there? And then my question involving that too is, if we just did 4 pickleball courts and the stormwater under those and on the western side under the Civic Hub part of it, would leaving the 3 tennis courts we have make a huge difference in the volume of stormwater that we could grab? That's my couple questions for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the first one was, why do we need a concession stand? Open floor, whoever wants to help with that.
I believe we heard at last workshop that an idea of a concession area on the backside would be beneficial, especially if you had an event lawn. You may not have the Taylor Avenue street closed off, and so we were providing that as an additional facility. But it certainly could be storage, it could be another bathroom,
Mayor, my recollection was it came from because the popularity of Friday Fest and having a beverage service counter, a place to do that. I don't know if a concession stand is the right word for it, but just a beverage service area, because we all know how popular that is at the Friday Fest. Just having a place for that and also near the restrooms, I think is very efficient.
Thank you.
Yes, I didn't realize that it was for the beverage stand. That's a good idea. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And the second question was in regards to, I think, the 2 tennis courts and the concern on whether or not we'd have the ability to hold tournaments. I don't know who would be the best to speak on that. Maybe Mayor Pro Tem Raymond or...
Yes, Mecky, thank you for bringing that up. Currently, we have 3 tennis teams that host tennis every week. We have the 3 teams. And we do need 4 tennis courts for that. And we've worked out a system now with the pickleballers. And it's only a couple of hours and we're finished. The rest of the day, people can play pickleball as long as they want. We usually play between 8:30 and 10:30. Thank you. And also, I understand that they're also very active at night, in the evening. And that's been going on for years. I think our tennis courts are about 50 years they've been there at Nancy Hansen. I believe. I don't know. Molly, do you know the answer to that question?
They will be 50 years old in 3 years. 1976 is when that facility was built.
Wow. There's always been a great tennis community here in Cape Canaveral, and people have come from all over to play, because often when I go to Rockledge, they say, well, I used to play at Cape Canaveral. But we have 3 very active teams going, 2 women's groups and a senior group. Thank you.
And Mayor, I think if I could pick up, on where Councilmember Kellum is heading with part of her question was, in a previous design, I think it was maybe option B or option 2, there was additional concrete sports surface in the area where the mounds are, or thought of that. And I think where she's heading is with those mounds there, which I think is item number 5, there would be no potential for stormwater storage there because the mounds are there. And if that was a sports surface, that could be a potential storage area for stormwater. I think maybe that's where she's heading. But I think the answer to that would be is we feel like we are probably going to have plenty of stormwater storage area with this design.
Correct.
So,
and we were able to, typically today you have 2 pickleball to 1 tennis court. That's just the way that you utilize them on either side. When we consolidate and do 6 pickleball with the appropriate run out, we're able to consolidate that in and actually restripe it on top of two tennis courts. So normally you get 2 to 1, but when you restripe it and redesign it, then you can fit 6 in the place of the 2, and we replace the third tennis court with that other facility.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the tennis? I think the amount of tournaments per year, do we have an idea?
I'm not sure. That would just depend. I'm just talking about what goes on between October to May.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the tennis players, and I think some of them were supposed to come to speak about that, but they were at other workshops. We're not adverse to moving the tennis courts out of Nancy Hansen as long as we have 4 tennis courts. And most of the tennis community says, we don't care, they can go anywhere, future. And as far as the clay tennis courts, I have to say this. The clay, that was one of the sky high that we did at a strategic workshop, a sky high, thing. And we don't want that here because we know that it's just too expensive to keep up. Thank you. Thank you, Mickey.
You, Councilmember Kellum, did that answer some of your questions?
Yes. So just for my understanding, if you took 2 pickleball courts out, could you add a tennis court?
No.
To make it 3 tennis courts and 4 pickleballs?
Not in the configuration.
And not mess with the mound thing or the staging area and.
Not in the configuration that you have it today.
Okay.
We could do 3 on the south side and reconfigure the north side and do up to 6. But you would have to lose the area south of the Nancy Hansen where those swings and mounds are to get 3 tennis courts on that side. And that's what it is today.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Or
all right.
Well, we had explored options up at C5 too, but those were a whole nother separate discussion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Council? Councilmember Willis?
Yeah, well, my main concern is the stormwater. You and I discussed that and making sure that we have that. Everything else could be very long-term phases. I'm sure we're going to be looking at what we actually need and want. But we do have $150,000, I believe, Mr. City Manager, sitting there for some planning.
Yes, that was the remainder from the loan, John, if I believe was $150,000, and we targeted that for demolition in fiscal year 23-24. The current fiscal year, $150,000 is there for that.
Right. Could we use that towards getting a more definitive plan on what we need as far as stormwater goes, or do we need to keep that in another pot?
Well, I was talking with Scott and his team this morning about the idea council's ideas was always to do this at least in 2 phases. One where there was the first phase of underground, all the underground, and the second phase would be all the above ground. So keeping with that this is a multi-year project, Scott and I talked about, well, could we scale this down to that the design costs could be covered for the first phase within this $150,000 range, rather than putting the $150,000 towards targeted demolition, put it towards first phase design. Scott, you want to share your answer with council on that?
Yes, absolutely. And we would just wanted to hear this dialogue about what your priorities were so we can help you match what those are. Because again, as we were talking through it, we were like, okay, make sure sanitary's in, make sure a support system in, make sure everything out of Taylor's in the way, but we certainly could do that. And again, the ballparks that we've shown in there for design as 10% of construction is just a ballpark. That's just a planning rule of thumb. When we understand what the task is, what the scope of work is, then we can narrow that in to be super efficient. And for $150,000 on phase 1, we can do a significant amount of that underground stormwater. It's at least in the food truck areas, the Taylor Avenue, And whether we do it underneath the pickleball courts, or we don't have to construct it. We want to certainly do the design to understand, again, the benefit of maximizing how much area we can get over there. I don't want to design too much and then we can't get the water there.
Thank you. Councilmember Willis?
Did that answer your question about the 150? I mean,
It
I
does.
don't know what we're doing yet, but I feel very comfortable we could get there.
Well, council asked for Kimley Horn to deliver this big, pretty picture, and you've done that. So we've gotten a look, we've gotten a peek at what this could look like in the future, which is fantastic. And I think everyone really likes this design on this dais up here. Now we know possibly what it's going to cost. Now we have to talk about next steps of how we want to get there, when we want to get there, phases, et cetera. And I think that's the natural progression of where we're heading on this dais, if I'm reading council correctly. And at least there's some support to go forward, possibly, Mayor, I'm not sure, with a design for underground with this money instead, as Councilmember Willis suggests. I'm not sure if the rest of the council's had a chance to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I think we'll continue to go through, and that's one. It sounds like Councilmember, the stormwater is a priority. I think you wanted to make that clear.
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah.
And then we would
Okay.
have to determine, what do we put on top of that? Say we pick Taylor Avenue. Well, what goes back? Is it asphalt? Is it pavers? Because you want to make Taylor Avenue all the way up to the food truck area kind of this, more enhanced pedestrian that ties into the promenade. Now we're talking budget, right? It's not that much harder to design one of those. Whether it's a street on top, it's just going to be more expensive if you put pavers on top, right?
And we did talk at one time, Molly and I were talking about a memorial paver program. Memorial purchases in the city have always been very important to our residents for trees and benches and whatnot, but unfortunately we're running out of places to put trees and benches. But a memorial paver program could be something that actually gets the cost offset to have this happen on Taylor Avenue potentially.
I like that.
And it can move to where the food trucks are, all right? So you have limited vehicular on top of those. Sometimes those paver programs are only pedestrian rated, so we just need to make sure that they're vehicular rated, that we don't have constant traffic. We've had issues with turning movements on pavers, so we want to make sure we do the design appropriately and the subbase accordingly to receive that kind of load and turning movements.
Thank you. Just going back and forth. Councilmember Davis, anything?
I like the idea of the memorial for the pavers.
Excuse me. So I think it's important to know, just from a financial aspect or whatever. So, and I'm sure the council will have to make this decision. So by September 30th, 2024, where do we expect to be on what will be done at that point? And then we could, based on what's going to be done, we'll see what kind of costs we're going to incur. Where are we going to be on September 30th, 2024?
According to this budget, we've only got $150,000.
And that's just for demolition. And is it true that, based on what will happen, that maybe all the demolition will not be done by September 30, 2024? Or what demolition do we expect to be done by September 30?
The current discussion item that Councilmember Willis put out was, instead of spending that 150 on demolition, potentially spending it on design of first phase improvements, just on design.
And you would push other construction budget items like demolition, like the cost of whatever those materials, bricks and mortar, further out a year.
Right.
Unless the grant came and pushed something forward, then you'd at least be shovel-ready plans so you could pair it up with a potential grant.
Yes, and it's worth pointing out, in future years in the CIP for the CRA, we did put in $1,050,000 in fiscal year 24-25. That was a guess because we really didn't know what we were going to be looking at in terms of expenditures. So we currently have those two numbers plugged into our CIP, 150,000 for this year and $1,050,000 in next year's budget.
And what that 500K in the 24-25 budget, the 500K, which was going to be covered by ARPA funding, that was specifically geared towards the stormwater portion. So then
That's
I was
first phase.
thinking first phase, and 24-25, that's my question is then, where even in 24-25, then as we push out even some demolition costs, is there some type of idea where we'll be on the amount of stormwater that we accomplish? And then what else in addition to stormwater do we believe will be accomplished at the end of fiscal year 25? Those would be some nice things to get an idea of for planning purposes. And I'm not trying to stump anybody here, but I'm curious as to actually how much do we expect to get done even in 24-25? Because as far as I look at the budget right here, what we put in the budget, right now what we have, and it's page 125 of our budget, we could easily attain those numbers. I mean, we have planned for those, what have you, but what's going to be interesting to see is how much further in 24-25 do we plan on, where do we plan on going additionally in 24-25?
Well,
Mayor Pro Tem, yes?
Exactly, other than the racquetball courts, what is to be demolished? Exactly.
shuffleboard.
The shuffleboard, okay, a shuffleboard.
And
What else is on the list?
Well, if we put stormwater underneath the tennis courts and the proposed pickleball courts, all that would have to come up too. That's the pink area or the purple area on here. Also, selective areas of Taylor are in that purple color. That would have to come up as well. And the parking behind the sheriff's office, all that purple would have to come up as demolition.
Thank you.
But
It's hard to, I know where you're coming from, Mayor Pro Tem, because demolition to me, not in this case, but demolition means we're knocking down buildings. But in this case, we're basically tearing up earth.
And this is the first time we're all getting a look at this. So we're all going to be coming from all kinds of different angles. And one of the first things I think about is the sequencing of this and how important Friday Fest is to this community. When we start tearing up this pavement, we can't have Friday Fest there. We start doing stormwater improvements, we can't have Friday Fest there. We can't have Friday Fest there until things are put back down in a safe way. So this first phase, now that I'm thinking about it conceptually, this first phase, if we do it, we'll have to take care of all that underground area and restoring the surface to a safe condition to bring Friday Fest back, even if we just then sit and wait for a year or 2 or 3 to do the above ground improvements. So that first phase, we need to be thinking of, if we do it, it's got to be done to a point where it's turnkey enough that Friday Fest can be brought back to it after the first phase.
But we have other areas that we could use in the city for Friday Fest.
Yeah, Molly, you have any
Temporarily.
thoughts about that?
My initial thought would just be to move it over a block, but
Where?
on Polk, because that's still avoids residential areas for the most part. But there will be an issue with parking access, because if we do move it over, obviously that takes out City Hall's parking and Cape Center parking as well. So parking is a challenge every day, but it will be more so a challenge with that taken out of the equation.
Thank you. Real fast. Hey,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, Councilmember Kellum.
why couldn't we move Friday Fest to the C5?
That's in the middle of a residential neighborhood.
Well, we did do the National Night Out there, and it was very popular. It worked, but I think parking was an issue.
Parking
for
was an
sure.
issue.
Maybe we could
and-
shuttle people from City Hall or something.
And the band will be an issue.
The band will be an issue. So, yeah, there's logistics to work out for sure. But whatever we do in a first phase is going to upset Friday Fest for some months.
Yeah, well, I mean, during the rainy season, it's rare that we can get 12 off in a year anyway, so maybe it's, we try to time it out with that.
If I may give you a couple of recommendations too to ponder or think about. Randy and I were just talking about the efficiency and effectiveness in each of these basin areas that we've already outlined. And I think one strategy could be to that west food truck area. So you get some west area, which is the easiest because it's already demoed today, for the most part. So that area isn't taking an existing facility, a pickleball or parking lot, whatever, out of play, because it's parking today, but again, and then you did the east portion of Taylor. Those two could be tied together with a pipe, a structure. You've got one outfall that could pop off or distribute south in a different direction, but that leaves the areas of your existing parking lots in the pickleball and tennis for some future phasing that you can have your first initial best, where we think the easiest stormwater be captured in your right-of-way in Taylor and in that food truck area on the west side. You do those two pieces first, and then you can wait and see. I think the last piece you do is the event lawn. That's the hardest piece. It may be even more expensive, especially if you do synthetic turf or whatever. You don't necessarily have to do that. It would allow us to figure out what you do in those other phases.
And the sequencing would be part of the design documents, correct? So we don't have to figure that out amongst us. We're not professionals at this. You guys are.
Right,
you could figure out the sequencing.
Right. We were just brainstorming on what we thought the most efficient first phase stormwater would be, because you could have some from the west that could capture your on-site. The Taylor would be the lowest and capture any of the other off-site, and that could be your first flush out of the Center Street drainage basin area.
I have a question on the, did you have something you,
Yeah,
please go ahead.
I did want to add something just to clarify that as part of the design for the stormwater collection system, we would design it all at the same time, but like Todd said, we would phase it within the construction documents.
Have its own sequencing within.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
The calculations on this sheet, I think it ranged from 80 to 120, depending on the technology, 120,000 or million cubic feet. The east basin's the lighter pink. The impact that this would have on the Center Street Basin, specifically, do we know what the lowest point is in the Center Street Basin? Did you say earlier, you were talking about how much higher Veterans Park?
Yeah, we haven't analyzed the entire Center Street Basin. We do have the mapping, and I showed you the picture of the mapping, so we can get that data for you. But it's connected. The biggest issue, and I was talking to Councilman Willis about getting the easternmost section of the basin over to this direction. Because at trunk lines, they follow down Orange Avenue and Poinsett. So getting some of that stormwater from the eastern side over to this side we're gonna have to analyze that a little bit.
The east side of Poinsett?
East side of Orange Avenue.
And move it over to the west side of Orange? That's the challenge?
To this park. From Orange all the way over to the west to this site, right?
So from like the 300 block to the 200 block?
300 block to the 100 block. So, yeah, he's going to pull it up here.
Thank you.
So we've got that area in this graphic that's surrounded Orange and Magnolia, and it's got Taylor in the middle there, but it's also got Polk. That whole 2-block area, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, that whole area would be redirected to the Orange Civic Hub area.
If we could. We ran into some issues with the corner of Orange and Taylor with the rain garden. We couldn't pull some of the water from Orange because the basin, we just couldn't make it big enough, right? The groundwater was too high. We couldn't get the water over there, and that was immediately adjacent to Orange Avenue.
Without looking at inverts, so the elevation of the pipes in the system, preliminarily, I think that the most efficient routing would be to interconnect the northern part of the basin would be to take a pipe from the intersection of Fillmore and Orange and run a pipe from there west to our site, tie it into the stormwater collection system that we're talking about today, treat the stormwater, and then it discharges south
Down Poinsettia.
down Poinsettia to down to the intersection of Buchanan.
So that elevation, the inverts, are going to be very important to know if that's going to actually happen. So that's information we're going to need very soon.
And it's off-site work,
Yeah.
Fillmore, right? Because now you're basically doing something with Fillmore, but the presidential streets, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you're probably even more familiar, was one of the worst areas of flooding.
Fillmore and Orange.
Right. So.
Yeah. Which means it's one of the lowest
Which-
areas.
Right. So it's one of the lowest areas,
Right.
and it's one of the highest priority areas to fix. So if we're going to try to take a trunk line from Orange and Fillmore to our site, that's actually the highest need area.
Yep.
But it's off-site. Quote, I'm air quoting off-site.
Is it possible to zoom in on this a little bit? Because if we could zoom in on the orange area a little bit more.
I think the bottom right plus minus 73%.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, if you could put the orange kind of in the center of the screen. I'm sorry, Mary, go ahead.
Just want to clarify before, the arrows obviously is the flow of
Direction.
stormwater direction. Thank you. Just, it seemed abundantly obvious, but it looks like everything flows right into Fillmore.
In the blue areas are the manholes and the catch basins, correct, Tim?
Basins.
Yep. So if I'm looking at the orange area, to the upper right-hand corner of the orange area, there's a couple blue circles and inlets. So those 4 blue dots, I'm going to call them, are collecting currently from Polk Avenue. And they could flow into the Civic Hub area. So you're taking those 2 blocks, is that correct? Those 2 Polk, so that would be City Hall and the residential properties to the east of City Hall.
I'm pretty sure Polk flows to the east to Poinsettia and then comes down Poinsettia.
Okay, so you're catching that area in the Civic Hub. And then the other subject area that really I'm focusing in is that Orange, Taylor, Magnolia 2 blocks. Getting that into the Civic Hub, the elevations are going to be critical to know if we're taking that load out of the Center Street Basin as well.
It appears, like Randy said, you continue that trunk line that comes from Magnolia at Fillmore and Orange, because if that's the lowest area or a point of biggest concern, it's just a matter of, by the time you get to Fillmore, do you have enough elevation in between that and the groundwater and the top of wherever our storage area is?
Correct.
To create enough volume.
And
Usable.
yes, and obviously the middle 2 blocks, between Orange and Poinsettia, they would also need to go into that basin as well. So there's 6 blocks right there going into the basin, plus potentially what you're getting off of Polk could be up to the 8 blocks right there if the elevations work. And that's a significant part of the Center Street Basin, 8 blocks coming off of that basin going into the Civic Hub. I don't see the big picture right now, but it's probably at least 1/3 to 1/2 of the whole Center Street Basin. Tim, is that close? Maybe 1/3? No, I would say maybe 1/4 to 1/3, which is still huge. And Mayor, I would suggest that that's good information to have before we know if how much we want to spend on a design for stormwater. Maybe we do a first phase of scoping what's the reality that we could expect to get here? What's the best bang for our buck we could expect to get before we spend potentially $150,000 on a design? Maybe we need to scope this. See, will this work? Does this actually give us the bang for the buck?
Yes, and most importantly, will it impact those problematic areas that we were saying, that the Fillmore Avenue, Orange, Fillmore and Ridgewood we know is bad down there. The direction off A1A, if I'm looking at Buchanan Avenue, in A1A in the 100 block on the map ahead of us. So I'm on the east side of A1A. It looks like the direction it flows towards A1A in the 100 block, kind of almost directly in line with Center Street. But do we know what Pierce and what Fillmore does in the 100 block? Do they?
Looks to me like they flow to Poinsettia.
Okay.
I don't know, but I would say anecdotally that based on the fact that the worst and lowest point is Fillmore and Orange, that they do that. They flow down from either direction. So from, goes east to west. I'm sorry. The lowest point is probably Orange Avenue, but I don't know if that's the.
Yeah, if I may. Actually, the middle of the 300 block on Fillmore is the lowest area. Definitely on the corner of Fillmore and Orange is a troubled area. The problem with the middle of the 300 block on Fillmore is that you have water coming from Ridgewood and from Orange on both sides heading to the middle of that road. So it's kind of like a gully, like and that's why it gets so inundated with stormwater.
One more time, say that, please.
Which part?
That was the last sentence. The reason it gets inundated is because it's
both
what
sides from
intersection?
Orange and from Ridgewood are going down to like a swale, like a ditch area. So there's two Type C inlets at the bottom of, I guess you could say, that road, which is mid-block. And so they're taking a lot of water on.
What was the presidential street? I know you said Orange and
Fillmore.
Okay, so between Orange and Ridgewood on Fillmore, that redirecting that water is important. Sounds like that.
Yes, that is not only that, but in that whole area, if you actually zoom in on a regular map, you'll see that around the Orange, Taylor, and Magnolia area, that whole square block's nothing but concrete. There's no pervious area whatsoever, so you're putting a dramatic amount of rainwater straight into the system, which is inundating the system.
We hate to speculate too much without actually looking at the control elevation on any of that. I mean, we can guesstimate, but we don't want to give you bad information either.
So getting back to the goal to prioritize, absolutely, stormwater is a priority, I think, for all of us. And this was great. I think going into the stormwater numbers close is a logical first step. How we do it, I don't know if that's the best way, but as far as that or demolish, yes, I think we would want to invest in understanding the stormwater calcs. But I want to make sure we invested in a stormwater study, I think one or two of them, when this flooding happened. And I believe the analysis was done that has a lot of this. Well, there was the Mead and Hunt.
Yeah, Mead and Hunt did a whole Center Street Basin analogy. You're correct.
And the GIS and the raw data is all, I think we should have rights to that data. I don't know if we do or don't. If we do not, my hope is that, I think we spent $80,000. It was a lot of money, and it was because at that point we had flooding, but we kind of had some different theories. It was heavy rain events, these kind of acute episodes. Or is it, development, impervious areas, as Tim, and so we need to study. We invested in it. I just don't want to make sure, and it was in the entire Center Street Basin. So my hope is that we have that data and we're using it today and able to use it. And if not, that to me, will that be utilized to determine we don't have to reinvent the wheel?
No, absolutely.
They would need that absolutely to do any kind of design work. Yeah.
Okay, so the one thing that I would want to know is just how many gallons, and I think this is what we're estimating high level and speculating, as you said, it would decrease in that lowest point. So defining the lowest point, and then what is the impact on that area and/or obviously any other areas. And I think that's exactly where we're headed. So no change in direction for stormwater, and as far as priorities, yes, on that. So yeah, that's it's a little hard to see the phases.
With all that dialogue was crystallizing the direction and the priority of stormwater first.
Yeah, and we also need to make sure there's no blinders on here that all of the city right-of-way can potentially be project area to resolve flooding in those areas. Right. It doesn't have to be just the Civic Hub. I'm looking at the first 2 blocks of Fillmore and thinking, why would we close our mind off to using Fillmore more efficiently, even if we wanted to put something in the right-of-way in Fillmore? It doesn't have to be right at the Civic Hub, but if continuing that into Fillmore gets it into the Civic Hub, absolutely, we want to know that best option.
Right, sure.
If we could, I'd like to actually go to, I got a public comment card here. Dr. Roberts, Scott, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll come back up. If you'd like to come up. And yes, I think we are all on the same page here. We zoomed out big picture. I mean, you asked how long. I think it was a 2 to 7 year intermediate project. And so how big it grows, obviously the space grew, but yeah, I think it's good. Yes, Dr. Roberts.
Thank you, first of all, for the workshop and all the work you all have done, council and staff, for leading this. Several observations. I think when I was looking at the different charts over here, graphics, I am concerned about what I would consider the balance and the flow. I look at things, obviously, when we used to think about city center. On A1A, how we've got the beautiful city hall, we've got the Cape Center now, and then, of course, we had talked earlier about the design of the promenade, you know, when we were originally considering that. And I think from my perspective, I'm not sure about the natural flow of things in the current renditions, because from my perspective, if you look at the city from A1A, you know, you're looking to the east side of A1A, and I would have seen more green space and maybe a more natural way of leading into the remaining design as we continue to go east off of A1A. The amphitheater, I always thought it would be a little, you know, closer to City Hall and the Cape Center, for example, and green space there. A lot has to do with the traffic and the pedestrian flow that y'all, I know, are considering as well. But I think the aesthetics for the city are extremely important to be a welcoming design that really makes sense from a variety of perspectives. I guess I didn't see that much parking close to A1A. I saw that more of a green sort of design there. I'm just telling you from a resident's perspective, an earlier council member. Also, the parking, as we know from our experience with Friday Fest and with the recent night out, it's a huge opportunity for the city, in my opinion, to plan forward. And this also may involve land acquisition. I hate this, but I know that we've got, if we talk about the city 20 years from now, we will look back and be so grateful for the council's vision in this regard. I really believe that we need to consider, as I think has been mentioned, green space parking or something that would be attractive to the city, but also solve huge problems right now. When I was talking to the team, you know, the parking that's planned for now is, in my opinion, very insufficient given the amount of popularity we've got both for our residents and visiting members from the community. The amphitheater, as we know at Friday Fest, the music, the opportunity for maybe some plays or something different at the amphitheater, I think is something that should be a primary feature of this. I think it was envisioned as such in the original renditions. Also, the consideration of a water feature that would be safe. I think would be an attractive consideration. We have mentioned this in the past. And then also ADA compliance and tripping hazards. I know when I looked at this, if you forgive me, just one more point.
You take your time, council, and think we're totally fine. Carry on.
There are some tripping hazards. I know the team is planning to take care of that, but if you look at some of the renditions, there are some tripping hazards there, both for those that are mobility challenged as well as just the normal public. And I think they're looking at ways to mediate that. So, and then the last opportunity is federal funding. There is so much opportunity here, I think, for the city to take advantage of some infrastructure funding potentially and so forth. And I know the city staff has been looking at this aggressively, but to me, this is a huge center heart of our city, and I think would resonate if we seek funds to help us with this. And it would offset maybe the funds we need for acquiring some land and so forth. So I truly am grateful to the council and the staff and the team, but I think it's a huge opportunity. It's the heart of our city, and I think it needs to be thought through thoughtfully with the needs of the customer, which in my opinion is primarily the residents, but the broader community of Cape Canaveral and the history and the legacy that we're setting forth for many years to come. Thank you.
Yes, as always, thank you. So valuable to have your knowledge and deep roots in this city and served it well for many years. So thank you, Dr. Roberts, and your comments. More green space, the parking issues, water features, federal funding, amphitheater. I think those are all excellent comments. The greens, today, will it become a greener space? I guess what is the net? Today, it's the trees. I think the goal is to keep the trees, especially the specimen. Maybe some palm removal. Is that the thought in general? I know it's hard to tell.
Yeah, generally you'll have a more green open space, especially where you have the in between where the old racquetball courts were and the shuffleboard courts. I mean, that's the event lawn and all that area. What we're trying to do is maintain all of the existing canopy that we've been stressing from both council and I think residents as well, maintain that existing canopy. And there's a significant buffer along A1A that we could make some penetrations to, but I thought we were just trying to keep that, to reduce costs, right? You don't want to take away things that you can just keep or have remain. But there will be a little bit more open space, mainly on that amphitheater event lawn area.
Compared to what it is today, because today it's pervious, hard,
it's
drains poorly.
Courts and shuffleboard courts.
Okay, so that'll clearly be an improvement in itself. Similar to the acquisition of the property, it was a paved lot and a building. Today,
right.
I think it drains better. But I guess, so those are all wins on the stormwater side. The green space side, as we roll around, it looks like kind of the same impact around the tennis courts, and with the addition of the ability to go underground dramatically would improve it.
Actually, it's just slightly less because we've taken away one tennis court and put those mounds in play space, so it's kind of that combo area. It feels a little bit lighter, a little bit not just flat surface area, but it's just slightly less, or just reconfigured there south of Nancy Hansey Center.
And the closure of the rendering that showed the stormwater layers, or the outline, the pink and the red, I think we had it up earlier. If we can show that one, the areas that are outlined in pink, the canopy of those trees and the oaks, so at the most eastern, the southeastern section there, down around the stormwater, I guess, yeah, right along Poinsettia there where the parking is for the tennis courts today. The idea is to go under that parking lot.
As one area, yes.
And that is the proximity to those, I assume, existing oaks today. Yes, there's a whole row of them right there.
Correct. The idea would be to maintain those trees. At this high level, we're just showing a general area. But yes, the idea would be to maintain those existing street trees that run along Poinsettia in between Taylor and Fillmore.
And when we go underground, I guess my understanding was that you want to go away from the roots on the canopy. So instead of digging up to the trunk, the size of it is the canopy.
Yes, basically the drip line of the canopy.
Thank you, drip line.
Root zone. So if you think of the canopy, the drip line is that area, translates to the below grade. And we want to preserve 50% of that critical root zone, which is basically 50% of that major drip line area. It doesn't mean cutting the tree right in half, right? It means 50% of the general area. But we would take precautions in those areas to preserve those trees.
Yes, I think that's one on the eastern part might be a little optimistic, but we don't know what those roots are doing. For all we know, they're heavier in one direction, but fortunate we have our city arborist and a team who can look at it. But that was my thought, was that around the sheriff's department, same issue. And so then you get back to underground. That would be, if you had to break up these sub-projects going under the street, would this be the first road that we've went underground with some sort of exfiltration?
The first city street that I'm aware of, Tim, we haven't done exfiltration or vaulting under any city streets.
Not under a city.
No, but what's interesting is you touch on a very important element of the Presidential Streets Master Plan, is to do exactly that. So this is kind of kicking off the Presidential Streets construction-wise, and how we intend to do that. And a lot of lessons can be learned from this too, about what works and what doesn't work.
Yes, I think as far as not interrupting pickleball, tennis, Friday Fest would be an issue. Maybe we can work around it. You know, being able to get that successfully done under the road and then roll and time it right with the seasons of the ebbs and flows of our Parks and Rec and all who participate. Yes, I agree. I think those two areas could provide a positive impact. And, you know, what goes above the ground, looks like we're not disrupting trees. I know that's important. The green space is important. That welcome, I don't know exactly what we called it, the Civic Hub, the gateway. Is that what it was? The entrance, the sense of arrival. I think it was positioned on Poinsettia. And yes, that. Does it make sense to put it, or maybe twice, will that be visible from A1A? I guess is the thought.
Probably not down there at Poinsettia, but could we do another one as a sister, as a an element on either end, or we prioritize it and move it up to A1A as a part of the promenade?
If the goal is, I mean, I love that it's resident facing.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, because there's no, I mean, I think they're both important and they're both special. But yes, I think that's really cool. Those are the things. I'm very happy at trying to preserve the mural. That's got international attention, and it's just really cool space. I think it's really expensive, I don't think anyone disagrees that it's expensive, but I think with phases over time, prioritizing stormwater first, I like what you said, Todd, with the kicking off the Presidential Streets Master Plan, especially when you go underground. That to me is exciting. If we can get a successful under the road project, you know, how can we roll that out? That to me we could do very fast, because what I don't want to do is make these improvements and then we're seeing better return in another area that we can address. And as long as we're trying to integrate that meet and hunt, the existing facilities study into this, I think it's good. And I love the aerials, the designs, the visuals. I think that the residents' ability to see this is really top notch. So thank you for all the design work and the ability to see it, and the numbers are helpful too. to understand trade-offs. You know, when you're saying no to something, you can see the amount that you're saying no to, but it might mean that you say yes to something that this council has a higher priority with. So those are my comments.
Mayor, may I make a comment on this view while you're on this sheet? And Scott, what page is this for Councilmember Kellum?
15.
Page 15 we're on. That seat wall, as it comes out to a gap right there, not wide enough for cars. Obviously, that would be some maybe a 6 or 8 foot wide gap, and potentially an entry feature there. This is one of the points that Councilmember Willis and I and some other staff members met with DOT on site right there in front of the mural, and we were pointing and talking about this. That, correct me if I'm mistaken anything here, Councilmember Willis. That would be a target area for a pedestrian crosswalk across A1A to directly line up with that opening.
Right. FDOT didn't realize the extent of what the city was envisioning, and it kind of swayed their thinking that there was potential development further to our south along the east side of A1A, plus what we were going to do here was going to be more of an attraction, and they were more receptive to signalized crosswalks.
Yeah, so we could be getting some efficiencies with FDOT in our crosswalk program because of this design with that opening right there for pedestrians. So that does make sense for an entry feature there. We just need to make sure that cars don't ever want to turn in there.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's good intentions can sometimes not.
We would build upon that to even further enhance that pedestrian connectivity to in alignment. Because you always want 1 + 1 = 4, right?
Yes.
When you're working with.
So if I could ask a question, so on Taylor, yeah, this is like almost a kickoff of the presidential. It would seem like it'd be a good idea, and I don't know if this is council's intention, is that as you do the Civic Hub and you're taking care of Taylor, the design continues down to try to accomplish the first presidential street.
That's
because,
I
right?
was kind of thinking the same thing, because
and
that
that's
picks
what you're
up all
telling me
that
earlier,
stormwater.
Todd. It seems like that actually could be somewhat of a cost savings too, but so you guys are going to do the Civic Hub, but since we're trying to do presidential streets and kick that off, then you would continue designing for the presidential street for Taylor, and that would be the city's first crack at doing presidential streets. That just seems like, you see what I'm saying? We got part of Taylor done. Would we continue down and say, and then we get an idea what the cost was actually going to be for doing a presidential street in the city, because that is one of the big unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting
And you could
handle.
extrapolate one road.
Right, and then budget-wise for the continuing years, we can say, well, geez, it's going to cost $3 million a street, not 1.5 million, so. Because then we're there, we started it. And Todd had mentioned that to me today, and I thought, wow, this could be a good segue.
Plus, it also makes a more holistic approach to solving the stormwater problem. It's not just this one little Civic Hub. We're now looking at all of, Fillmore and Taylor perhaps, and all those blocks within that. It's not piecemealing it. It's getting a lot more out of it because we're thinking larger now. It's still going to take several years to get there, but planning for it very smartly.
So tonight, the objectives for this is to give the public an additional opportunity to provide input on the Civic Hub project. I think we've done that, and we're doing it. Number 2, to give the City Council an opportunity to review the finalized design and provide comment and input to help identify the surface level amenities, which will in turn inform the design and capacity of the stormwater infrastructure. I think we're working through that, but generally we've certainly commented on what we've seen. And then the 3rd is to provide the direction to the city manager on moving forward with the planning and construction of the Civic Hub project. And I think we're at this direction, as you said, of what the priority is, stormwater. Potentially, no decisions, but there is funding opportunities. Or the budget still has $150,000. So yeah, I just want to bring us back in there and see what do we need to do next.
If I may, as part of the stormwater design, I think that we really need to look at the big picture from the beginning, right? Because if our intention is to treat as much stormwater as possible, we need to see how much total volume we're going to need to retain in the system. And to do that, we need to look at all of the presidential streets that we intend on treating and receiving. So I think that, in my opinion, in order to get the best results, we would first size the system, see what the maximum volume we can get out of it is. Then from there, we subtract what we need for Civic Hub. We know the remainder is what we can use for the remainder of the streets. And then we look at an analysis. We do a basin study for what all of the other streets are producing in runoff and how much of that we can actually route to the system and see how much can be captured. That's just the study part of it. And then from there, we can phase it. We can just do the Civic Hub, and then a couple years down the road, we tie it into the presidential streets with whatever construction activities may be required.
Yeah, the ideas of presidential streets is, what do we own? We own Polk Ave, we closed Polk Avenue, we have Polk, we have Taylor. Sort of made sense there. That was a centerpiece several years ago. They were talking about developing Polk, and some plans I think were early stage. But now it seems that like flooding as you head south seems to become maybe the origins and what'll drive where presidential streets begins. So thank you. And appreciate you explaining the approach to do it right. So thank you. Okay. Is there anything else that we can do to provide comment, input for the design? I mean, I have little stuff, but yes.
Confirmation of the master plan as presented. I know there's some back and forth and some trade-offs, but confirmation on that too. I don't know if you're trying to finalize this so we can put a bow on this and say, okay, well, this is the area that we're going to have to start with that first phase design. We don't want to be moving tennis courts at this time, or changing major design considerations.
I think we're circling around, Mayor, on asking Kimley Horn to bring back the final conceptual design based on today's input. But also, Mayor, I understand, or I believe, that council would like to have the benefit of a proposal from Kimley Horn for the study and design. So the study of the larger area and how it can be put into the Civic Hub, and then the design. So a proposal for study and design, bringing that back to council. Maybe that would be something council would like.
Yes, I think we're not going to take any action, but
right.
Just in general direction and consensus, I think.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would like to be sure that they have access to all of the stormwater studies we've already paid for. So
I'd like to know what the cost would be for more study. Since we've already done the stormwater study, we just need mainly to connect the studies that we've already done. So what would the cost be?
And I think we're going to ask for the study first so we don't duplicate. We'll take absolutely all of the information, make sure that the big idea that Randy just explained and a part of the presidential study, because Randy actually, he and Brian Ashby, I think you met during the public engagement meeting as well. So they were a part of the presidential streets big picture program. So they've looked at it from the presidential streets analysis. We just need the actual guts of that study. Yeah, correct. And absolutely, it's a great point. We're not going to duplicate or need to duplicate information.
So if that's council consensus, we do understand what you want to have brought back to council, and we'll have to work with Kimley Horn to get that to you within the next month or two.
Okay. If there's not any final comments, Councilmember Davis? Okay. Councilmember Willis? Sir. Mayor Pro Tem Raymond? Anything on this? Councilmember Kellum?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just would like to say that this is an awesome project, and thank you to Kimley and Horn for their designs and all their work and the staff. Just, it's a lot of money, and we have the presidential street master plan and also that we're trying to accomplish. So if we could get as many grants as we could possibly get, that would help us out financially. But it's a good plan, and I think that we're heading in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any final comments, Scott, and your team?
No, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Mayor.
Yeah.
Yes,
As long as we're done with all the Civic Hub stuff. Mine
just
doesn't-
one final check.
Yep.
Anything Civic Hub related?
I'm good.
Okay, let's go to reports.
No, I just want to ask a question. Today we scheduled a meeting for 1 o'clock. I'm not sure why council was so adamant about having it at 1 o'clock. As council knows, I do work. This costs me wages to come. So I would like, out of respect and courtesy for any consideration of future meetings, to have them from 4 o'clock on instead of having them at 1 o'clock.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Davis. 4 p.m. is moving forward, and after is ideal. Anything prior to that has a cost.
Unless it's something of urgent nature, then I completely
Understood.
understand. But unless then it causes a hardship on me, and like I said, it does cost me wages. So if it's something that's not urgent, then I request that it be considered to be later.
Thank you. Okay. City Attorney, any comments? Tim? Okay. City Clerk? Okay. City Manager?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If council is okay, meeting adjourned.